Thank you, everyone. I'm really excited to be here in Croatia. My last name is actually Croatian, and if you want to hear a cool story about my last name and why it is Stimac, come find me during the break or after the conference. It's pretty cool. So I don't like to presume that you know anything about me. I'm Stephanie. In my day-to-day, I am currently a PM and project manager at Igalia, which is an open source consultancy for the web platform team. We are the people who build features for the browser when browser owners don't have the resources to do so. So a fun fact that I like to give about Igalia is we're the reason that CSS Grid exists in the browser today. And you might be wondering why a product person is up here to give a talk about design. I've had many titles in my career, whether that's program manager or product manager or experience designer. At my core, I am a web designer. It's how I started my career. I've spent a lot of time designing for developers and building for developers and working with them, and I'm incredibly passionate about smoothing any friction between designers and developers when they're working, and this is what I'm going to talk about today. This has actually been a really, really difficult talk to write, which is kind of funny to me because I have also written an entire book about design for developers, so you think it would be really easy to formulate a talk, but I didn't want to regurgitate my book and make this Design 101. I wanted to provide a different perspective beyond what I've already written. The other aspect that makes this really difficult to talk about is the fact that when I talk about developers learning design fundamentals, there is a subset of the UX and design community that absolutely loses it. And a highlight of my career after publishing my book has certainly been being called names on LinkedIn for wanting to help developers learn about design. So obviously, I'm going to keep talking about it. Because they say that when I talk about democratizing information about design, that I am diluting. I am devaluing design. But I don't think their argument holds up, because wouldn't the inverse also be true? I think this rhetoric that gatekeeping design fundamentals equals more value ends up doing more harm than good, because people are probably hearing that actually design is less valuable when that's not the case. Because design fundamentals are the base. They're the basics that experts layer on top of. And the expert bit is where real value comes in. And that's not what I'm advocating for developers to learn when I talk about developers learning design and UX. So I have two goals for today. For developers, I want you to have a basic understanding of how design and UX can help you in your role beyond just learning about visuals and how to design. And for non-developers, so designers, I want you to be able to be an advocate for developers in your organization to be included in the whole project process. And before I start to really dive in, I just want to say it's okay to disagree. I'm not here to start a fight. I'm not here to tell you you have to learn design. I'm just here to share my observations and how I think design and UX can help you grow if you're not a designer. And I just want to say the following examples may or may not be based on true experiences. So let's dive in, and let's start with an exercise. So I want you to pretend that you are a designer in a startup. You have a huge backlog of work. You're building zero to one products, so brand new experiences that have never been built before. You're only one of two designers for an organization that has multiple products across different platforms, so probably about 5 different teams. You also need to conduct user research. You also review design system components before they get shipped. And then you have all the other little requests that pop up, like someone needs an SVG file for the logo, or they need a PNG, or they need a hex code, or just randomizing tasks. How does this make you feel? Stressed? A little bit? So imagine you have all this and you're trying to keep that work-life balance, and then one day, your CEO comes to you and he says, the UI has way too much space. We need to rework it. Look at our competitor for inspiration. We need this fixed today. Totally, absolutely not based on a real experience. So you have a couple options. Option A, you stop what you're doing and mock up an entirely new UI with new spacing to hand off to your developer. Option B, you sit with your developer and walk through making updates together. Or option C, you have a quick sync with your developer and then they will make the updates and you can review before they push it live. Show of hands, how many of you would choose option A? Option B? Option C? So for me, personally, it would be option C. Because this shows that you have complete trust in your developer and that they can handle this. They understand the design language that the company's using, and they know how to make small adjustments. Unfortunately for our real-life designer, this is not what happened. They did indeed do a full mock-up with new spacing, and they had to present it, and then hand it off to their dev. And this took them away from their priorities for the sprint, and this further delayed other deliverables. So, what's the point of this exercise? If you get this right, you will get a copy of my book. Who wants to guess why contextualizing this is important? What am I trying to get you to feel for your imaginary designer? Just shout it out. Kind of. Did you say empathy? Yeah, empathy. Yeah, the point is empathy. We want to place ourselves in our design counterparts' shoes because if we can get a sense of how they feel in that scenario, when unexpected tasks pop up, we understand how we can help lighten the load on design, particularly in instances where changes are kind of mindless. They don't need to do a full mock-up in that situation. Design is also typically more understaffed. It's harder to get time from them to work on things. This is just an inherent flaw in the way that we currently work. Design is less valued. You're going to have less designers than developers. And so when we can work together, this frees up design to work on the big stuff that will have way more impact, like user research, to ensure the thing that you, the developer, is building is actually solving a customer problem. Because we're co-creators of a product. We share ownership of building the experience, yet so often the narrative about how designers and developers work together stems from the age-old question, should designers code? And I think Brad Frost sums things up really well from a design perspective. Telling web designers they don't need to worry about code is like telling architects they don't need to worry about steel, wood, or physics. Does that mean designers need to know how to implement designs in code? Do architects need to be able to lay a block foundation or hang drywall? No. But just as web designers should care about and know about code, web developers should care about design and design fundamentals because they have to translate visuals into code. It's two sides of the same coin. It's not about becoming a good designer. It's about understanding design. We already do the same things for engineering in a sense. We reduce complexity, repetition, and increase facility for long-term and scale. Design does the same. Now, people think I'm advocating for developers to take design jobs, to take over visual design, to take over UX research. I'm not. I'm not advocating for that. I'm not advocating for the unicorn designer developer, replacing designers, or that toxic startup culture. I'm advocating for developers to care about what comes before the code and understand the base layer of the systems that are the blueprint for what they're building. So why should I learn design and UX fundamentals, outside of just wanting to learn about design? What if I told you it had nothing to do with becoming a good designer, and it was about becoming a better coworker and a better engineer? So the first reason that we've already established is empathy. You should learn design and UX fundamentals to gain empathy. First and foremost, this helps put you in your customer's shoes to understand their point of view when they're using your product. And then you're also going to have empathy for the rest of your team. When you remove yourself from the silo and ask to be involved, you gain a better understanding of what problems your product manager might be dealing with. You gain a better understanding of what design might be grappling with, and you get a bigger picture that can help determine what technical decisions you should be making, because those decisions can change depending on the audience and the problem that you are solving for. So what is empathy? It's the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. And you might be saying, well, I don't have good empathy. How do I get that? And so if you feel like you struggle with empathy, there are things you can do to help develop those muscles. There's lots of different exercises you can do in your day-to-day in your job. One of the go-to exercises for me is to help build customer empathy, is to take a few key user journeys for whatever product or experience the team is working on, and imagine the worst case scenario that one of your users would be in while navigating your product. So they'd be in a very stressed state of mind. And if you focus on building for someone in that stressed state of mind, those people who are in a less than ideal emotional state, being able to navigate your product means that people who are in a normal emotional state should be able, in theory, to navigate the product with ease. But if you put yourself in their shoes and can really feel what they would experience, it's going to help you encounter flows in your product that are confusing. You can also ask to be involved in user research. You can help design, conduct usability testing, interact with people who are using your product. Just observing can be really beneficial. And this doesn't mean that you have to be the one who comes up with the user experience questions or develops all that. Just say to your designer, I'd like to sit in on a user research session and just observe. And when you're participating in research sessions, pay attention to how expressions change. Does their voice change? Do they hesitate or they seem excited? Try to connect with how they're feeling. You can also look at empathy maps, which are tools that help externalize knowledge about users to create a shared understanding of user needs and aid in decision making. Again, this is something that your designer probably has, and these really help visualize users' needs, feelings, and behaviors. And then outside of work, just expand your horizons. Try something new. Try reading a different book than you normally would of a different genre. Try listening to some different music. Maybe go to an art exhibit if that's not something you normally do. All of these things are going to help you build your empathy. Because empathy gives us the ability to remove our ego and personal biases from the equation and truly align on the vision for the best user experience with our design team. And being empathetic has many benefits. It allows us to build more inclusive experiences. We reduce our internal biases, or we can be more aware of our own personal biases. We foster innovation because we can think outside the box. And it helps us place the customer at the forefront of what we're building versus the business. Which leads me into number 2, user centricity. So understanding design and UX helps center the user in everything that we're building. Because everything is a part of a system. If we don't care about what gets built underneath everything, we end up with a mess on the outside, on the front end. And once those messes have been created, they can be impossible and incredibly costly to fix. So what happens when you don't have anyone thinking about your customers or your users and you're just focused on the business? I unfortunately have the best case study that demonstrates what happens in that scenario. So for this story, I'm going to refer to Company A and Company B. Company A is the parent company that was doing the acquiring of Company B. And Company B was this very, very small startup that was acquired. So I was a product manager for a product that was acquired by Company A about a year and a half before I joined the company. So this happened way before I had joined. Now, the user experience on Company B's website was super easy. It was really intuitive, really hard to get lost doing what you needed to do. You could manage your team and team access to projects incredibly easy. It was all good. It was just the essentials. There was no design bloat. It was just easy. It was just good. And there were remnants and screenshots and documentation and lots of customer feedback about how easy this all was before I joined. So I was able to reference it and gain an understanding of what Company B had and compare that against the mess that we were now trying to untangle. So they have a great website. Customers are happy. The revenue is rolling in. They've got that sweet MRR that everyone on Twitter won't shut up about. It's all good. And then they got acquired. And from what I can tell, this is where it just went off the rails completely from a UX and customer centricity standpoint. So instead of letting the tool and site of Company B operate as it was and maintain its integrity, someone said, okay, we've acquired this thing, so we need to migrate everyone from the database of the tool we acquired into our database ASAP. Like that it needs to happen. And so this meant that we need to migrate everyone, and we're talking hundreds of thousands of users, and they still need to maintain the ability to manage their account. They need to be able to manage billing, who has access to the team, and they need to maintain the structure of the teams from the tool. And now maintaining the structure of the team was absolutely vital because that was the source of recurring monthly revenue. So they migrate the user accounts to Company A's database. There's tons of data and privacy concerns to consider. They take care of that. They do all that. And then if we go through our checklist of what else we need to consider, that's it. That's all they did. There was focus on getting the user accounts moved over on the back end without accounting for anything else. And it resulted in the biggest user experience mess I have personally ever encountered. And not only as a PM, but a PM with design and user experience background, I felt like this while trying to connect the UX from the app to Company B's website, which was still up and running in some capacity, to Company A's website. It was a mess. And it was incredibly noticeable, especially as a customer. We were getting complaints about not being able to maintain teams, and they couldn't manage their building. It was a mess. And the mess occurred because in the original product from Company B, you had the simple idea of teams. And then you had individual accounts within a team, and they had access to the same team project. And it was migrated to this product of company A that had the idea of organizations. And then within organizations, you had teams, and then individuals within each team. So there was a new layer. However, the existing structure of company A's feature was never intended for the same use case as company B's feature. Organizations were an access construct to give people different access to parts of a project and different management capabilities within an organization outside of actual development. So company B's original intent with teams was just to allow engineers to work on these specific technical projects that were the teams simultaneously with branching in tools, sort of like GitHub for API building. And so these are two things that had inherently different goals, different target audiences, different tasks to accomplish. So at first glance, like a sneaky puzzle piece, the user database was migrated, and it seemed to fit, but upon further inspection, especially at the front end, it didn't. And the migration caused a huge regression in customer experience. Our highest paying customers with large teams lost the ability to add new users to their team. They lost the ability to manage their team without company A's help. They couldn't update their billing automatically. They had to be manually billed, which led to a loss of revenue for company A because there was no good way to track it, and no one was updating the spreadsheet monthly. So the ease of use completely vanished. And instead of taking the time to think about how company B's product and structure would fit into the existing system from both a back-end and front-end perspective, everything else was unceremoniously shoved into the existing system. It cost design hours, engineer hours, monthly customer success, and product hours to track who was being billed manually and chase all that down. It cost the customer hours because instead of being able to simply add a new dev to the project, they had to email us, and then we had to bill them, and they ended up having 2 teams to manage because we actually hadn't figured out how to add new devs to an existing team that had been migrated. They only thought about the business and the business image and nothing else. And it left chaos behind the scenes that no one had time to fix. This is a startup. You have 10 to 15 other priorities. You don't want to be fixing a mess from a year and a half ago, but it was affecting the customers. And I don't think there was a moment where someone stopped to ask what would happen if the business requirements were pushed through and what that meant for the customer experience. There was no user centricity. No one thought about what a database migration meant or what migrating teams into organizations meant. And it was costly in more ways than one, because not one person took the time to say, what will this do to our customers and our customer experience? And so when you focus on creating smoother experiences for your users or your customers, that's going to have a net positive impact on your overall business. You're going to reduce development costs by identifying issues early on before everything is built. This means less bug fixing, less stress when fixing an issue. Would you rather find a critical issue before or after you ship or have a product launch? Preferably before, because if it's after, serious technical incidents usually require everyone dropping what they're doing to investigate and mitigate any negative customer impact. Second, enhanced user satisfaction means building a product that people love. If people are happy with your product, they're going to share it and they're going to talk about it without you asking them to. This is something that I experienced with the product that was acquired from the previous story. Developers loved Company B's application so much, and it was constantly being shared as one of, if not the best app for its purpose without us having to even ask. But the quality of the experience started to degrade after the acquisition, and that affects not only the customer, but how you as a developer or a PM or a designer feel about what you're working on. You want people to like what you're doing. You don't want to get constant negative feedback. And so the team is generally going to be more happier and more engaged when you're all aligned on a common goal. I've seen feature requests come down from the top of the chain, from the head of an organization, that are purely business-driven. And that alienates people if they're suddenly not building something that they feel serves customers. I could create a longer list of the positive impact of user centricity, but I feel like that would be an entirely separate talk. So these are my top 3. But placing the user or customer at the center of every decision that you make, even if it's on the back end, is going to help you identify major problems ahead of time. You just need to take a minute to stop and think. So number 3, why should I learn design and UX fundamentals? Patterns and reusability. At its most base level, design is purely about relationships, how things fit together and relate to each other. Whether that's through color, typography, grouping pages by layout, contrast, sizing, you're creating consistency, you're creating a system. It's a tool that creates a system that orients users when they're traversing your website, your app, whatever your experience is. For example, if I'm on a documentation page or I'm moving through a docs experience, if the layout of the page suddenly changes when I'm navigating and I'm still within the docs, I'm going to get confused and have to reorient myself for a moment because the pattern has been broken. So consistency, it's just good UX. And this is where design systems come in. For developers, hopefully you know why design systems are great, but if you don't, these systems can help reduce shipping duplicate code. It helps you ship faster. It helps keep pages and websites maintainable, and it unifies the whole company's visual language. And as a developer, you should be helping to shape the direction of the library or system that your team is building, because you're bringing a deeper technical understanding to ensure that components are being built the correct way for accessibility and performance reasons. You should be building out components with semantic code where possible, because there's no excuse for a button made out of divs in 2024. And yes, this is still happening for often no other reason than a lack of understanding about code. And when you as a developer understand what a design is trying to achieve, you can make recommendations at the code level in a system or library on how deeply you need to break down components and patterns to have a system that scales and can be of use across multiple teams and even the broader company. You can ship more code that helps you achieve your defined performance metrics with the design system too. Who doesn't love reducing the amount of code needed to ship something? Even AI knows how much you love deleting code. You also have the functional and technical knowledge to know when an existing pattern isn't going to work. For example, let's say your designer is building a new experience in a new context or platform. They're using the design system, but they most likely don't have the technical expertise to identify when a pattern or experience needs to break away from what's in the existing library because of technical limitations. And these are conversations that you want to have before you're too far down a path of building the experience and then having to go back to the drawing board. So you're going to reduce churn and burnout having those conversations ahead of time. Understanding how to identify patterns and where to reuse code is going to make your relationship working with designs much more efficient. And in the end, it's going to make your code and design system and experiences built from that more efficient and more performant. Number 4. Now, for me, this is probably the most important thing, but that might just be because I'm a product manager, so I'm always talking to people. There's lots of communication that's happening between multiple teams. But number 4 is common language. Understanding design and user experience fundamentals is going to open up an avenue of communication with a shared language. Shared language creates understanding, and understanding creates empathy, and empathy reduces hostility. I have seen and I've experienced the frustration that leads to really bad energy between devs and designers, and often it's because there's a breakdown in communication. Especially when a design has to change for technical reasons. Designers, you can't design inaccessible experiences and then get defensive when your engineer wants to fix that. And then on the flip side, developers, I'm pretty sure designers aren't trying to purposefully design something that you can't build. At the end of the day, it's about improving the experience for the end users and having a shared goal. We have the same goals, and in order to get there, we've got to learn how to communicate with each other. It goes both ways. Designers should have some understanding of front-end technologies that dictate what you can do on the web, but I'm not asking you to be an engineer, just as I'm not asking engineers to be designers. I'm just asking for enough to meet your developer in the middle, and for the developer to meet your designer in the middle, and come to a solution. And when you continually do this from a place of empathy, you're not just removing hostility from the situation, but you're also building trust. And trust is vital to a good working relationship. Now, what about all these designer developer tools? Aren't they supposed to make communication better? Well, I'm glad you asked. Just because you hand me a wrench, for example, or a spanner, doesn't mean I know how to use it. Some dialogue still needs to happen. You need to tell me how to use it correctly. And there are so many tools being pushed out to help facilitate designer-dev collaboration. And it's great. It is great. But a tool can only go so far. It's not going to solve everything. And you really need that shared language to succeed, because a tool isn't going to fix all your problems. This is an ad that I got on Twitter for a tool to improve designer-developer collaboration. There's a whole video, but I don't have the video. But the developer puts a horn in the face of the designer to get them to stop talking. So there's hostility even in advertising. Like, the designer-developer relationship is just seen as hostile. So learning design and UX fundamentals gives us a common language that can take our relationship with designers to another level and create a space of shared understanding. And last but not least, why should I learn design and UX fundamentals? Number 5, diplomacy, AKA career advancement. The best managers that I've had are truly, truly empathetic. And I think you can tell that there's a difference when someone says that they are empathetic and someone who actually is empathetic. You can really actually feel that difference. You can tell. And when you're building your skill set to understand how everyone's role benefits the team, and you can vocalize this, this is going to make you a stronger candidate to lead people or get a promotion. If you understand the strengths of the people that you work with, as a manager especially, you'll know how to activate those strengths so that your team can do the best work that they're capable of. They're an advocate. They're able to navigate company politics in a respectful way, and they will truly understand the value of each role in a project, from research to design to development. And this leads to building great products and ensuring things happen at the right phase, as well as making sure that the right technical solutions are being implemented. So, why should I learn design and UX? As we've established, it's not necessarily about being able to design better or being able to design at all. It's about expanding our point of view, being empathetic, user-centric, learning about patterns and reusability, having a common language, and being diplomatic. We dedicate a significant portion of our time in this life to work. It's only natural to want to work with people who not only understand our perspectives, but also care about the way we collaborate in a respectful way. By learning design fundamentals, developers can bridge the gap between the technical and the creative and foster a much more cohesive and empathetic work environment. So let's invest in understanding design to enhance not just our projects, but also the way we work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Yeah, so we have some time again for questions. Steven, do you want to start?
Great talk, thank you very much. So, I completely agree with you about empathy, but I fear that you didn't mention about how people are different. And I'm quoting here, but the designer driving to work sees the clouds in the sky and the trees in the field and a cow mooing in the field. The programmer driving to work sees the tectonic plates moving under the earth and drives into the cow. They're two completely different sorts of people.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, absolutely they are, and I don't want to detract from that at all. But I think opening, again, it's not about trying to get programmers to see exactly how designers see, but we expect so much of designers already. It's always, should designers code? Should designers learn, know how to build a website? But it's never the inverse. So we're asking designers to expand their point of view, but we never flip the conversation to ask developers to do the same.
Thank you for the presentation, and I have two comments. In the exercise that you gave us at the beginning of the presentation, I would add another option, which would be stop this silly request and don't do anything. There should be because it looks like there was a CEO or a manager who doesn't have a clue what good design is, because he just saw something on a different page and okay, it looks cool. There should be a procedure for that okay, this is a silly request, we don't do anything, so everybody saves time. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that I completely agree that developers should know basics of UX and design, and I will tell you why. Because, for example, I work on a customer-facing product, which is funny, a documentation portal, you mentioned it. So we get help from UX designers when it comes to landing pages, to search experience and stuff like that. But I also work I'm part of the documentation team, so I have to support technical writers when they create documentation. So I very often have to develop internal products, and I don't have the comfort of working with UX designers, so I have to design it myself. So for example, I created a plugin for the application they use, and I had to design all the buttons, the interface, so it's usable for them. So this is another reason for learning the basics, because it really, really helps. So thank you.
Yep. To your first comment, I'm just going to say, yes, the CEO was unreasonable, and there's a reason that they laid off 80% of the company. So, yes, here's to saying no to more frivolous requests.
Hi. So, suppose you're looking for a new job. I'm not, but suppose, how would you recognize a company that does all of these things well?
Oh, that's a good question, and I don't know if I have an answer off the top of my head. I would first look at company values, because you're not always going to be able to tell initially, but I think the way in which so I have an example that's coming to mind. There was a company that I applied to that I did not look at their company values ahead of time, and when I went to go interview, I double-checked, and their first company value was shareholder value is our North Star. And I immediately was like, oh, actually, no. I've been in that situation, and that typically is indicative of for me, not the type of work environment that I want to be in, because that means you're solving problems for shareholders and not your customers. And so right there, like there's no user centricity. So I would say first check out their company values and just sort of explore their website and their mission statement, and then actually like look at the products that they have built. And I think you can get a sense of how things are, but I mean, you're not really gonna know until you're in there, because sometimes they can do like pull out the rug from underneath you and you think it's one thing, and then you get in there and it's not. So that's unavoidable sometimes.
For one more.
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for your presentation and for lifting up very important topic in nowadays. And as a designer, I understand that maybe it's my responsibility to provide some information for devs to make my life more comfortable with communication. And now I'm a bit struggled with what's the specific topics I should provide for them to learn, what exactly from the fundamental of the UX or UI part they should know. So maybe you could suggest something. Thank you.
I think from like the visual side, legitimately just the base fundamentals of like what is contrast, what is spacing, I'm completely blanking on, but if you have them Google like design fundamentals, usually like 7 pop up, and they're just very, very basic, that people have created lots of graphics for about like relationships and shapes, and I think that helps a lot on the visual side. I want to reiterate spacing, because I feel like that is something that comes up often. And then on the UX side, this is a tricky one, because you can go so deep with user experience, but my recommendation is always just like have them sit in on a user research session. Like they don't have to do any of the like preparation for it, but if you have like a script that you are going off of, if they feel comfortable, maybe they want to be the one who just reads through the script and gets the answers, or they can be the one who's scribing the answers. Like, but I think that is a good place to start, and then just being involved in any exercises that you might do with like sticky notes to help like identify customer problems and things like that.